All right, okay, let's get started then. A very good morning to all of you. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you for taking our time and joining us for today's session. Before we get started, I just want to establish a couple of quick ground rules. I would request all of you to please remain on mute during the presentation. And of course, you can feel free to unmute during the question and answer session. This session, of course, will be recorded and it will be shared with the participants post the webinar. And if you're going to be having any questions during the session, I would request you to kindly leave them in the Q&A box, and we'll definitely pick it up towards the end of the session during the Q&A aspect of it. So without further ado, I welcome you all for today's webinar on the third-party cyber risk management. My name is Sandeep, and I've been with Safe Security for more than 5 years now, working with enterprises, helping them measure and quantify their cyber risk and the breach likelihood. Now, moving forward, let's look at what's an agenda for today's session. I'm going to be starting by giving an introduction to safe security, following which we're going to look at what is the third-party threat landscape looks like in the current day and age, after which we're going to look at what are some of the challenges and the limitations of the current third-party cyber risk management practices the organizations are currently following. And finally, we're going to look at how safe security for that matter are going to help organizations redefine the third-party cyber risk management in a more continuous and comprehensive way for organizations through a platform called as SAFE. Now, without further delay, let's look at who we are as an organization. So Safe Security is a pure play cybersecurity firm. We basically help organizations measure their enterprise-wide cybersecurity risk by taking inputs from people, process, technology, the third parties the organization work with, what kind of risk they inherit from third parties, the cybersecurity tools the organizations have, and using the machine learning enabled API-first platform that we refer to as SAFE, we help organizations dynamically predict the breach likelihood. And not just that, we just go a step forward, and we also help organizations understand what does it mean to them in terms of financial exposure of the risk if they were to endure the breach in the next 12 months. Now, as an organization, we are based in Palo Alto, California, with over 200 people working across the globe. We cater to well over 200 customers worldwide. And I'm happy to share that we enjoy a very healthy net promoter score of 87 from all the customers that we work with. Not only do we work with the Fortune 500 companies, we also have been known for our contribution to the security community. We've been one of the top contributors to the National Vulnerability Database of the US government in 2019, and also the contributor to ADT and CK MITRE framework in 2020 as well. We've been among the top 10 contributors to Center for Internet Security globally in 2019. We've been recognized by OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, as among the top 23 cybersecurity vendors in the world for the mobile security testing. We were also recognized by Gartner in their 2019 market guide as one of the leading pure play VAPD vendors as well. And what I would like to highlight or bring to your attention is that we've been doing a joint research and development with MIT Boston with regards to the quantification of the enterprise cyber risk. And we've gone on to build a scoring algorithm based on the research and development that we've been doing since 2018. And what you also see at the bottom of my screen are some of the logos of the top customers that we work worldwide, which includes the likes of P&G, News Corp, Munich Re, Akamai, and so on and so forth. Now, not only has the security community recognized us for the work that we've been doing, we've also been recognized by some of the eminent personalities. In fact, our CDC investment was led by Mr. John Chambers, the ex-CEO and chairman of Cisco. And it's with immense pride I would like to share with you that John believes that safe security is going to be a game changer in the cybersecurity space in the years to come. And also very recently, just about a couple of weeks back, we also announced the investment of British Telecom into safe security. And we're collaborating with British Telecom to reach out to more customers who can help them measure their cybersecurity risk and then, predict the breach likelihood for their organizations. And apart from this, you can also see some of the key angel investors, which includes the MD of Sequoia or the managing partner from McKinsey or the CTO of PayPal and the likes of it. And some of these guys, you can also sit on our advisory board, mentor us and guide us and reach where we are today. So moving forward, coming back to today's topic, which is all about the third-party cyber risk management. Of course, okay, the third-party data breaches are on the rise. Now, until some time back, organizations almost entirely dedicated their cyber efforts to secure their network perimeter. Today, the same organizations are increasingly worried about the third parties that they actually work with and the third-party risk they are inheriting. Now, according to Gartner, in the last 4 years, the compliance leaders have classified 2.5 times more third parties as a top threat to the organization. This is basically because the third party risk has fundamentally changed. Today's third parties require more and more access to organizations' data. They are increasingly working with their own set of third parties. In fact, making the entire third-party ecosystem very complex and massive in size, thereby increasing the attack surface as well. And there is a greater variability in the maturity of the third parties itself. Now, all of these have been further corroborated by a recent study that was done by Ponemon pertaining to the third-party cybersecurity risk. Let's look at what the third-party assessment of the study done by Ponemon has to offer. Now, according to the study, almost about 51% of the companies who participated in the study said that they've been breached due to a third party. And a whopping 44% of these companies mentioned that they experienced a breach in the last 12 months. And what was even more concerning was the fact that 63% of them believes that the third party is the weakest link in the chain, or the third party's remote access to their network is their weakest attack surface. Now, besides knowing all the risk, what was even more concerning, or what was revelation from the Ponemon study, was the fact that most of these organizations lack a comprehensive inventory of the third parties that they actually work with. And there's absolutely no doubt that the lack of visibility of your third parties has definitely been one of the contributing factors for the rising third-party breaches that we've been witnessing. Around 59% of them said that they don't have centralized control over the third-party management. 47% of the companies believes that the complexity in the third-party relationship has been a barrier for them from being able to maintain an inventory of their third parties. And 43% of the companies believes that the lack of resources or the in-house competencies has been a challenge for them to be able to track and continuously monitor third parties as such. Now, obviously, apart from all of these, what has also been worrisome for the organization has been the increase in the ransomware to third-party software. Of course, we've seen the likes of Kaseya or the SolarWinds attack, and the attackers are very smartly moving the ransomware from the third parties to the first party using the privileged access. And not just that, if you are working with a third party who have access to your sensitive data, and any attack or any ransomware outbreak of the third parties is as good as a potential data breach in your hands as a first party organization. And not just that, apart from these, you just think of all the business interruptions the organizations will have to endure if the third parties keep being down for a day or a week or even more longer. All of these are definitely a worrisome factors for the organizations, and the reason why they need to consider the third-party risk management more seriously than what they are today. Now, moving forward, as a testimony to all of what we just saw in the previous slides, are some of the top breaches that we've all witnessed, that have happened, including the likes of the Mercedes-Benz or the Target hack or the Marriott hack or the General Electric, leading to millions and billions of dollars in losses. And not just that, in some of these instances, some of the sensitive information pertaining to the employees and the customers have been stolen or compromised. Now, if I were to quote from the cost of a data breach report from IBM, out of the 26 factors they actually studied that led to the breach, the involvement of a third party was one among the top 5 contributors of a breach. And whenever there was a third party involvement, the cost of a data breach actually increased by more than $370,000 on an average, which is a shocking statistic, right? And then, of course, not to discount all the reputation damage these third-party breaches actually brings to the first-party organizations as such. Now, having said all of these, let's look at how organizations are really trying to manage the third-party cyber risk, today from the third parties that they're actually working with. Now, as an organization or as a cybersecurity vendor ourselves, we've been quite surprised to learn that even some of the largest organizations today, they depend on the questionnaire-based assessment for the third-party risk assessment. Now, though we believe that the questionnaire-based assessment is the foundation of the third-party risk management, no doubt, but the questionnaire-based assessment in itself is just not sufficient for organizations to have a comprehensive and a continuous view of the third parties. Now, some of the major limitations of the questionnaire-based assessments have been, these are absolutely point-in-time assessments, which definitely fails to address the ongoing changes in the relationship of the third parties. Now, we have seen over the years that some of the third parties, more and more third parties the organizations work with nowadays consist of startups or the business model innovators, right? And some of these third parties have started delivering services which is outside their core competency model. And they also started delivering a new in-kind technology services to organizations, which makes it all the more reason why organizations will have to have a continuous monitoring of their third parties. And given that these questionnaire-based assessments are done at the time of due diligence, just before the onboarding, or at the time of recertification, just simply fails to capture their ongoing changes in the security posture. Now, in fact, according to Gartner, about 83% of the compliance leaders believe that they were able to identify the third-party risk after the onboarding of the third parties was over. Now, moving forward, what we have also noticed this is the questionnaire-based assessments usually take form of lengthy spreadsheets, which are very complex and time-consuming in nature, and becomes a totally impractical process for organizations to scale as well, right? And finally, given the answers to these questionnaires are very subjective in nature, it kind of fails to provide a reliable and a transparent view of the third-party cyber risk posture. And not just that, it also deprives the organization from the ability to benchmark the vendors with the industry peers or the industry average and try and understand where each of the vendors actually stands. Now, these are some of the larger limitations of the questionnaire-based assessments. And also one more thing out here is many of the organizations do not even tailor their questionnaires based on the criticality of their third parties or vendors. And we've also seen that some even mistakenly believe that there is no need to assess their lesser critical third parties as such as well. Now, moving forward, what we've also seen is some of the organizations using automated tools to do this external assessment or the outside-in assessment of the third-party vendors as well. Now, these tools are quite handy in terms of, they are very easy to deploy. They do a quick dipstick assessments of the third parties. And also, they are quite useful in benchmarking the vendors along with the industry peers. But having answered that, there are certain limitations, in our opinion, that also comes along with these tools. If you were to rely only on these tools to do the security assessment of your third parties. Now, given that these tools basically go about doing the assessments based on the primary domain of the third parties, and just assess the external digital footprint or the publicly exposed infrastructure, we believe that given that these external digital footprint only compromises a small portion of the overall tech stack of the third-party organizations, it kind of provides an incomplete picture of the cybersecurity posture of third parties. And not just that, these tools can depend upon a lot of passive DNS sources or the historical data to be able to do the assessments and then come back with the scoring. And given that the scoring is based on the stale and outdated data, we just believe that sometimes it could be unreliable with a lot of high false positive rates, which we've also learned from some of the customers that it drains their resources if you're working on such information which are no longer relevant to them. And finally, due to all this incomplete information, what organizations tend to feel is the risk rating provided is unreliable, and sometimes it can also be misleading in the fact that it can give you a false sense of security if the score turns out to be really good, especially of your third parties as such. Now, having discussed these approaches that the organizations are having, let's look at what Gartner has to say about what's going to be the prediction about the third-party risk management. And Gartner believes that by 2022, the security ratings will be as important as credit ratings when assessing the risk of the business relationships. And we totally are in line with that. We basically believe that the quantification is absolutely necessary when it comes to doing the third-party risk assessments, because basically what it helps organizations do is establish a threshold, so that they do not have to onboard a vendor who's not meeting that the baseline or the threshold the organizations have actually established for themselves. And not just that, the cyber risk quantification also helps organizations, benchmark the vendors along with the industry peers or with the industry average. And the quantifications would also help organizations to track the trend of the cybersecurity posture of all these vendors. Now, keeping all this in mind, okay, how does safe security propose organizations make the third party the strongest link using a platform called as SAFE, that stands for Security Assessment Framework for Enterprise? So let's look at it. So what we propose to organization is a 360-degree view of the third-party risk management, which includes not just the external assessment of the third parties, but it also includes the integration of the questionnaire-based assessments, along with the inside-out assessments, which is basically the contractors of the third parties who's probably working in the premises of the organizations or outside the premises, in terms of how good they are, in terms of their, cybersecurity awareness. Do they have any kind of deep and dark web exposure? What about the security of the endpoints the contractors are using or having access to the first party network? How secure are those endpoints? And how about the security of the cloud providers or the cloud of the third parties itself? Now, by combining the external assessment along with the questionnaire assessment and along with the inside out assessments, that brings in all the visibility to organizations, organizations can now have a comprehensive view of the third parties as such. Now, having had said this, if I were to refer to the Forrester that says that the organizations are working with more and more third parties on an average year on year, we do understand that, the organizations needs to have a tailored approach while adopting this to do the third party cybersecurity assessments. And keeping that in mind, what we actually recommend organizations is, a tiering approach, or the approach based on the criticality of the vendors that they have defined. The organizations are working with some of the critical vendors who have access to your very sensitive and confidential information, who forms your tier one vendors. We believe that the organization should have a very comprehensive approach towards having the questionnaire-based assessments along with the external or the outside-in assessment, combined with the people assessment or the contractor assessment, the endpoints and the cloud assessment as well, so that you have a complete view of the cybersecurity posture of these critical vendors. For those vendors who have been classified as high severity, maybe your tier two vendors, you can have an approach of questionnaire and outside in, along with the endpoints assessments of these third parties. And finally, for all your medium criticality or low criticality vendors, you can have a combination of questionnaire and outside in assessments. So which basically helps you design your approach overall towards your third-party risk management as well. Now, what we effectively do, like I was telling you at the beginning, is we take the signals from all of these individual verticals, put together in a Bayesian network, and then go about giving a score per each third party. So basically, organizations would have a centralized dashboard to look at the score of all their third parties and be able to benchmark them against the industry average, as well as go about comparing them with the industry peers, and be able to have a single dashboard to be able to visualize all the risk inherited from the third parties and work towards mitigating the risk which are coming from the third parties as well. Now, moving forward, let's look at why organizations need to use safe third-party risk management. Obviously, the first and foremost thing is that what SAFE allows organizations to do is switch from a point-in-time assessments to a continuous monitoring of the third-party cyber risk. Now, definitely, like I was talking about in my previous slides, SAFE will effectively allow organizations to switch from one-size-fits-all solution to a tailored approach based on the criticality and the materiality of your third parties as such. And obviously, given that if you bring in the comprehensive data, which not only is based on the external assessment, but also the inside-out assessments of the organizations, and bring in more relevant and accurate data to organizations, which basically helps organizations to save the resource drain and help them work on more accurate and holistic data and work towards mitigating the risk they're inheriting from the third parties. And finally, where SAFE comes in very handy for the organization is that it can act as a single platform for the organizations, not just to measure and visualize the third-party risk, but it can act as a single platform for organizations to also visualize and quantify their own cybersecurity risk at the enterprise level. Okay, so a single dashboard or a single platform or a single pane of view for an organization to visualize both the first party and the third party risk as such. Now, let's look at some of the customer use cases, how some of our largest customers are actually using the third-party risk assessments. One of the largest reinsurers of the world actually uses SAFE to make the underwriting decisions. Now, we've seen one of the global restaurant chains actually leverages the SAFE platforms to do the assessment of all the franchisees and then measure the cybersecurity risk of the franchisees that they're working with. And we also noticed that one of the Fortune 500 FMCG companies actually banks on SAFE to measure the cybersecurity risk of all their distributors that they actually work with as well. And not to mention, one of the Fortune 100, in fact, public sector banks, which relies on SAFE for caring about all its third-party risk assessments. Now, these are some of the common examples or use cases that you've seen with organizations using the SAFE platform to effectively track and monitor the third-party risk that they're actually working with. Now, let me just go to the platform itself and give you a quick demo. Let me stop sharing for a minute. Great. I hope all of you are able to see my screen. So what you're seeing here is the SAFE platform that I was talking about. SAFE stands for Security Assessment Framework for an Enterprise. Now, what you're looking at right now is the overall dashboard that talks about the cybersecurity trend or the quantification of the organization. It says, the current score as of today is 0.40 on a scale of 0 to 5. And this is the overall organizational, cybersecurity score, the cybersecurity maturity score. These are further compromised with the scores from the people vertical, policy vertical, technology vertical, the CSP, and the third parties as well. Now, if I were to scroll down further, we talk about what are all the various technologies that the organizations have onboarded onto the platform, which includes your cloud workloads, the applications. It could be the server and endpoints, and the network and security nodes in terms of the firewalls, routers, and switches. And then a score being given to every technology vertical, also talking about the asset count as well. Now, scrolling further down, what we also provide organizations are the location-based scores, so that organizations can see what is the security maturity of each of the locations that they're operating from. And further going down, you're just talking about all the gaps that you can see that have been identified, which are further categorized into critical, high, medium, and low. And what we also help organizations with are the scores of their compliances, as well as those scores for the policies as well, which they probably would have defined as well as implemented within their organizations, and how effective they are by doing the assessments and assigning a score for each one of these. And if I scroll down further, we then can look at all the third parties that have been onboarded, as well as the people assessments. Now let's go inside third party to just get a little bit more view into that as well. All right, okay, so what you should be able to see on my screen right now is the trending in the third party score. So what do you see, the dashboard that you see right here is the trending in the score of all the third parties that have been onboarded onto the platform. And let's say in this instance, a total of 262 third parties in the demo instance that I'm showcasing to you right now. And what we also do is let the organizations have a visibility of the distribution of these total third parties of 262 across the scale of 0 to 5. How many third parties have a score between 0 to 1? How many of them have a cybersecurity score between 1 to 2, and so on and so forth. Now, it's really quite easy for organizations to go ahead and onboard a third party They just need to add the third party out here and just enter the company name, the domain name, the industry, and the location. And once that's done, okay, the automated assessments actually begin. Now, if you were to look at any third party, for example, okay, that you have onboarded out here, and if I were to go inside one of the third parties to showcase to you, what the data would look like. So let's say, okay, from the external assessment at your point of view, we just, based on the primary domain of the organization, okay, we go ahead and enumerate, okay, the associated domains and subdomains, and based on which we map out, okay, the digital footprint, okay, of the organization, including that IP address, okay, and the domain names as such across all the locations. And okay, we also go about, okay, during the automated security assessments of the domains, including their email security, application, network security, the breach exposure, the compromised systems and cyber reputations, and so on and so forth. And based on the gaps, okay, that are identified, okay, which are further categorized into critical, high, medium, and low, we provide the score for the external assessment. And then, okay, for each of the gaps identified, okay, we help organizations, okay, with the remediation steps as to what exactly they need to do to make sure that, okay, these no longer remain a threat, okay, for them. So we provide that remediations which organizations can take it up, okay, with the third parties and help them patch that, okay, so that, the score can further improve as such. Now, okay, this is purely from the external point of view. Now, if I were to go to the inside out assessments, okay, that I was talking about in my presentation, just give me a second as it loads. So basically what we can help organizations do is, provide a visibility as to the security posture, okay, for all the internal IP addresses or the assets. Basically, you can look at, it could be the cloud workloads, or it could be the endpoints, the middleware, so the servers or the applications, okay, for that matter. We'll be able to provide, okay, do a thorough continuous assessments across these assets. And then, okay, being able to provide all the actionable intelligence in terms of the controls, okay, that are failing, which are further mapped to the industry standards. And along with that, okay, what we can also help organizations do is, like I was telling you, provide the remediation guidelines, how they can actually go about patching these controls to make sure that, these things are addressed in a timely manner, so that, okay, they no longer become a challenge, okay, for the organizations in terms of, being exploited, okay, by a hacker. And then if you were to look at the people point of view, I was talking about, providing security awareness campaigns, okay, to the contractors. Okay, so basically we can equip organizations, provide the cybersecurity training courses, okay, to the contractors, okay, the third parties having access to their network. And not just that, we can also gauge the cybersecurity awareness, okay, by providing a score for each of these contractors, as well as assessing whether any of these contractors have a deep and dark web exposure as well. And further, okay, do the device security assessments of these contractors and make sure that, okay, they're completely up to date in terms of their handheld devices and also their mobile devices, okay, for that matter. So by doing the people, technology, inside in and outside, outside in assessments, inside out and outside in assessments, we basically provide organizations a 360-degree view in terms of managing the third-party risk assessments, and not just that, as well as being able to have a continuous view as well as a comprehensive visibility into their own cybersecurity posture as well. So, having given you this demo, I'll just just quickly get back to the presentation, and then, like, if there's any question, we are happy to take that. I can answer your questions at this point of time. Sumit, do you see any questions in the chat box?
No, Sandeep.
All right, I believe, okay, there are no further questions, okay, from anybody. So we're going to be providing you the link to download the presentation that I was walking through, and this session itself, okay, will be recorded again. Will be shared with the participants, okay, post this webinar. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to have a detailed discussion, okay, pertaining to the first party as well as the third party risk management, and we'll be happy to discuss that in detail. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us for today's session.